Not far from the area, there was another beautiful planet similar to the blue planet. With a serious expression, Lu Shang used his power, and martial fire began to emerge from his eyes. Lu Shang extended his hands, and with a smile, began to release his power. His spiritual power was at level 11. Although he had no idea what level his stellar martial body equaled, Lu Shang placed his hand on top of his chest, and his eyes widened with seriousness. He knew that his martial arts had also evolved greatly after merging with the paths of his masters, but it was impossible for him to clearly describe his current level. The gain had been immense, and fully assimilating it would require a long and deep process. Lu Shang's attention was fixed on one of the planets, and his eyes began to shine with joy, making a smile appear on his face. He decided to organize it as he advanced step by step on his path. At that moment, Lu Shang's eyes were filled with seriousness, and his mind was filled with curiosity, since something caught his attention. Not long after, his eyes began to shine with joy again, and a smile spread across his face upon noticing that another outsider was coming toward him. With an angry expression, he clenched his fist and decided to use them as guinea pigs for his experiments. In the vast stellar space, tens of thousands of light kilometers from the blue planet, were the spaceships of the Fat Man and the Long-Haired Man, traveling at high speed toward Iggy's coordinates. While the Fat Man was eating another meat pie, the Long-Haired Man, who was sitting in a chair, began to observe him closely. Called him Frando and asked what he thought about this matter. In Frando's spaceship was the princess, lying on the floor with her clothes torn. The Fat Man had already spent quite some time with her. He took a bite of his meat pie and, with a serene gaze, mentioned that there was no choice but to go directly to where Iggy's trail had been lost. He speculated that maybe he had run into a patrol of Star Police, and perhaps they had already killed him. The long-haired man couldn't help but smile, and his eyes began to shine with malice. According to him, if Iggy was dead, it would be good, since that way they wouldn't have to share the loot with him. Frando began to observe the system window and couldn't help but smile, explaining that in any case, they should go take a look and report the situation to the boss. Giving the order to depart, the spaceships activated the space jump and set course for the galaxy, where Lu Shang's blue planet was located. Several minutes later, the ships arrived at the blue planet. With a joyful gaze, the long-haired man pressed the button of the ship and, with a smile, mentioned that this blue planet was really beautiful, and decided to first activate the energy scan. The spaceship began to scan the blue planet. The man began to observe attentively, and the system revealed that it had detected an energy source of level 9. And above, Frando put his hand under his chin and, with a confused gaze, mentioned that this was strange. The attention of the long-haired man was fixed on the system window, and his mind was filled with curiosity. He did not know what was happening. Frando's face filled with sweat, and his eyes widened in fear, since he knew that Iggy's ship was clearly on the planet. But the scan showed no energy source of level 10 or higher. He wondered if IG had abandoned the ship and fled. The long-haired man's eyes widened with seriousness, and with a confident smile, he made it clear that IG's death or escape didn't matter, as long as they weren't Star Police. The essential thing was to recover the ship, in order to report to the boss. After saying this, he began to show an arrogant gaze. Upon hearing this, a smile appeared on Frando's face, since he thought that he was right. With an evil smile, Frando began to rub his hands. The eyes of the long-haired man began to shine with wickedness, and with a smile, he mentioned that now they could also loot this planet. He began to imagine Jules and the members of his team as members of the infamous Crimson Eye-Star pirate clan, known on several planets, were emotionally very cold. For them, the life or death of their companions did not matter at all, as long as their own life and money were safe. Everything else was irrelevant. He stood up, walked away from the system panel, and with a smile decided to descend to the blue planet. Just then, the ship system issued a notification. Upon hearing this, his attention was fixed on it, and his eyes widened with curiosity. Once he turned around, the system began to scan the blue planet and revealed that a new energy source had been detected. The result of the initial scan had been incorrect, so a new scan was being performed. His eyes filled with confusion as he did not know what was happening. Not long after, the system revealed that an energy source of level 10 or higher had been detected. The system started scanning again and revealed that a power source of 1110 or higher had been detected. Not long after, the system reported that the scan result was wrong, so a new scan was being performed. The system started going crazy. He placed his hands on the panel and, with a confused gaze, began to wonder why the system was failing. He turned around and, with a serious expression, informed Frando that his radar seemed to have detected a level 10 warrior. Upon hearing this, Frando felt confused, since his system had not detected anything. While his eyes were shining with confidence, he began to shake his head. extended his hands, and with a smile, explained to Gueshur that in such a miserable place as this one, it was impossible for a level 10 warrior to appear. So it surely was a system failure. Just then Frando's eyes filled with curiosity and confusion as something caught his attention. Behind the blue planet, a powerful martial energy began to emerge. Not long after, a giant star in the shape of a sun appeared behind the blue planet. The attention of Frando and Gishi was fixed on it. Their eyes filled with fear and their jaws dropped in confusion. They did not know what was happening. The star passed over the blue planet and began to approach at great speed toward their spaceships. Frando and Gishi panicked, realizing that it was the sun. With eyes full of fear, Gishi swallowed saliva and began to sweat like crazy. He wondered what was happening, since a star so close to a habitable planet could not be something normal. Frando began to sweat like a madman, and with a furious gaze he realized that it was not a star, but some kind of divine martial ability. The sun began to expand, and little by little, it started to explode. Frando's attention fixed on it, and his mind filled with fear upon realizing that there was a human silhouette inside the star. Once the sun exploded, Lu Shang emerged with his body surrounded by martial fire and began to advance toward them. His eyes began to shine with excitement, and a smile spread across his face. He made it clear that in front of the blue planet, space trash was forbidden from passing through. Frando began to lose his mind, and with a nervous gaze started shouting, asking Gueshur to flee. He felt confused since he didn't know what was happening. They turned on their spaceships, and without hesitating for a second, they turned their backs on the blue planet and began to flee. Frando, who was controlling his spaceship, clenched his teeth and felt furious. At that moment, he understood the terrible truth about Iggy's death, realizing that they were facing a true monster. With a look full of fear, he turned toward Luo Shang, realizing that he had at least the power of an 11th level warrior. Immediately, he decided to make a space jump to escape and return to inform the chief. While little by little their spaceships were moving away, Lu Jing began to observe attentively in silence. Lu Jing extended his hand toward them, and while his eyes were shining with excitement, he activated his mental power and could not help but smile. Now that they had arrived, it was clear there was no reason to leave now. Lu Shang's martial energy began to take effect, and little by little, Frando began to bleed from the mouth with a confused gaze. Full of fear, he realized that this was martial power. Gishi began to vomit blood, and his eyes widened in terror, realizing that this was the spiritual power of a level 11 warrior. Not long after, Frando collapsed to the ground, wondering who that spiritual warrior with such immense power really was. At that moment, with his body surrounded by blue martial energy, Lu Shang appeared on his ship and began to observe him silently. With a curious gaze, our boy began to stare intently at Frando with a piercing expression. For him, those below level 11 were as easy to eliminate as cutting grass. He barely touched their souls and extinguished them immediately. He realized that without noticing it, he had grown to that level. At the same time, aboard the claw of the Star Pirate clan, deep in distant space, there was a man with purple hair, sitting with his hand resting on his head, and sunk in his thoughts, he was the Crimson Eye, the leader of the Star Pirates. His eyes began to shine with rage, since Gishi and Frando had also lost contact. A woman with brown hair who was holding a tray with a glass appeared, and upon hearing this, her eyes filled with confusion. The leader turned toward her and began to observe her in silence. He stood up and with a curious gaze, activated the spaceship system, causing it to start showing the blue planet. He couldn't believe that a small planet with level 1 resources had managed to make it G and the others. 3 level 10 warriors disappear without a trace. The woman crossed her arms and with a confused expression thought it was the work of the Star Police. The leader's eyes began to shine seriously. For him, it was not very likely that it was about the Star Police, because even if a large contingent arrived, his men would not have stopped sending at least one signal. Most likely they had been eliminated in an instant. Upon hearing this, her eyes filled with fear and she couldn't help but panic. With an uncertain expression, the leader decided to go take a look. With eyes full of terror and concern, she also decided to go with him. The leader's eyes began to shine with evil, and a smile spread across his face. He felt calm as he believed he had an ace up his sleeve. Even if a level 11 warrior at their peak came to catch him, he trusted in having the strength to come out unscathed. They had lost 3 people for no reason at all, something that had never happened before, so he had to find out what had happened.